Good afternoon from the KCAL 9 News studios. I'm Sandra Mitchell, and you're looking at live pictures right now from Sky 9, where there is a fire burning. This is Woodland Hills, and it looks pretty ferocious because a backhoe there, part of a construction crew, has hit a gas line, and you can see those flames are being pretty fierce. They're fueled by that natural gas line. We don't believe there are any injuries right now, but apparently a crew working out there had a natural gas line, struck that gas line. We're told that Southern California Gas is en route, and there are some evacuations underway because apparently some buildings in the area are being threatened right now. Again, we don't have any injuries reported. We don't have any buildings burning. But this is
all right, so we see, hello everybody, my name is Sean Morris. I work with State of Connecticut PURA, as we heard through my introduction from Dan. So we just saw a pretty serious damage that took place. Obviously somebody was digging near what already you can visually see in that video, actual natural gas facilities, pipes sticking up out of the ground. General things. I don't know what was the exact cause or who was at fault for that said damage, but obviously a serious situation, luckily no injuries, but a pretty substantial fire. Start from there. So utilities, especially when you hit a utility as well, damages can affect other utilities. You think about if you start fire, you'd be burning telephone poles, wires, things like that, damaging your own equipment. As we transition from talking about damages, and we'll talk a little bit more about what to do when you do have damages later in the presentation, we're going to talk about what to expect in the ground when you're digging around. What are you going to be looking for? What do you expect to see for utility facilities buried in the subsurface of the earth? So first off, we're going to start with our natural gas pipes. Plastic pipe can be yellow, black, orange, and tan. So if you think about older plastic gas lines, Adelaide plastic, very brittle plastic material, generally will look orangish, almost will sometimes blend in with the clay of the ground as well. It can be very easy to break as well. Sometimes they're mistaken for just tree roots. Quite a surprise there when you do hit it. We also have a lot of steel and cast iron gas pipes, as we mentioned before, over 27,000 services that are still active, that have existed since installed prior to 1940. You saw some 1917 service cards as well in previous parts of our presentation. But as you can see, steel gas can vary in color, shape, size. So they can be black, yellow, green, brown, gray. They can have tape around it, for extra protection. Sometimes you'll see steel lines are painted with a corrosion paint on it, so they have that yellow paint on it. You want to do your best to dig around it and not damage or scratch the paint too badly. And just because, it looks like it's a tougher material, such as, cast iron and steel, doesn't mean that you can't dig more aggressively around it. You want to handle it with care. You have to safely expose that facility and then work around it. If we think back to our Derby gas incident, cast iron, very brittle material, doesn't like to bend, sway, or move a lot. Sometimes you'll actually see even locators and utility companies send notifications that you shouldn't do any vibratory excavation over a facility because of how fragile these actually can be. It's always good to make note about what you're digging around, the type of facility, and relay that information to the crew so that they understand what they expect to see out there. And obviously, with natural gas facilities, we have our T's and services. Just to make note here, notice how the T's here come off the main. Generally, these will be marked in the left-hand picture over here as an active T right here. We have an active service. As you can clearly see, it does change in elevation. So you may be digging, having the pipe partially exposed, and then you get up to the T. Maybe you covered the T mark out with the spoils. You didn't realize there was a T there, and you think you can put the bucket in the ground to dig, and you may be puncturing that T directly. And it's also on the right-hand photo, we can actually see two cap services. So these services are no longer functional. They're not running to the house. They're capped at the main. Generally, these won't be marked because they're actually going to be, they're considered dead services, and they're actually considered just part of the main. But notice that there's an elevation change. So you may, you want to clearly expose the facility to the best of your ability before you put any bucket in the ground. And again, we'll talk a little bit about hand digging requirements around gas lines. We have specific regulations about that. And we can definitely, we'll get in depth with that. And then again, as you can see here, change in elevation. So you may actually have this section of main over here completely uncovered. So this whole area is uncovered, but this isn't. You decide to, hey, you know what? I can put the bucket in the ground. I think I can clearly see it, which you should not be doing. But either way, you decide to do it to maybe get the work move a little faster. And then you puncture that 2-inch main. you definitely want to, be cognizant of the pipe, where it runs, if there's any change in elevation or anything you can notice. Just, dig with care. And then obviously as well, picture on the right, plastic pipe comes in coils. It tends to like to move a little bit after installation as well. So as you can see here, we got a little bit of sway back and forth for this pipe. Hopefully there's a good tracer wire, a good signal for a locator to be able to effectively mark that out. It may, you're interpreting a signal that you're inducing onto a piece of pipe, onto a tracer wire in this case, and you definitely want to, you hope that that signal is good enough that you'd be able to trace that out. But also to make note, this is definitely coming up and going down, almost like on a hill. So there might be another structure underneath here. And then again, pipes are not always going to be at the depth you expect them to be, especially older grandfathered services as well, and lines. Some of them are not up to grade, or the road grade has changed over time. So, elevation can definitely change suddenly and unexpectedly. We have some more plastic facilities. The top photo is actually one of the earliest installs of plastic pipe in our state. I believe this was in, I want to say Newington. I was actually on site for this one. Luckily, it was not a damage, but you can tell, hey, you may look at this piece of pipe and not know what the heck it is. So you're definitely going to want to, if you have questions or concerns, you want to contact the gas company, but also make note about how many pieces are actually coming off of that main. So you can clearly see here, there's a lot of, if you think you've clearly uncovered it, you're going to put a bucket in this area, you're going to come in contact with these, going to cause a gas leak, going to cause potential issues. And then on the bottom here, we have a purge riser right over here for a gas main that's on the end of an 8-inch steel main. This one was actually damaged, so you actually can see the end cap here was ripped open because they thought they could put the bucket in the ground and expose it. They thought they had exposed the main enough, and that it was the end of the main, so they didn't expect anything, other parts of the facility to kind of jut out. So a lot of times, especially with the gas facilities, a lot of pieces of the facilities that may jut out and change direction or go farther out than you expect. So they actually ripped that cap off. I was on site for that one. You could actually hear it whistling about a mile out. I had the windows down in my car going down to Brantford, and you could just hear it. And the closer you got, you definitely needed earplugs for that one. So definitely had a little bit of ringing in the ears. As we had talked about before, inserts. Sometimes pipe is not just being inserted into older existing pipe. So, you can see like in pictures before where you have an insert into an old existing steel main or a steel service line or an old existing cast iron service line. Sometimes they're put into conduit as well, because you think about developers. A lot of times developers will receive a lot of conduit from a utility company, or they'll have their own conduit on site, and they'll install it for future utility installs. And sometimes those will get utilized by the gas company as well. So as you can see here, we have 3 examples of different inserts. Some of them actually have a plastic sleeve over it, and that section right there, it almost looks like it's actually going into a steel pipe. And then a lot of the same over here. And then obviously we have our conduit, and as you can clearly visibly see, the tracer wire. Just another thing I want to make note as well, definitely dig around tracer wire with care. You don't want to be damaging it and then putting it back in the ground, because then a locator is going to come by. He's going to try to hook on. He's not going to get a good signal and not be able to do a safe mark out for the future. So if you do end up ever damaging tracer wire, definitely give a call to the utility company. They'll come out, they'll replace it. It makes everyone safer in the future as well. And then also, gas pipe is not just the pipe. Gas facilities are not just the pipe that's in the ground. We have a lot of different parts of the facility that are there to protect that facility and ensure its longevity. So as you can clearly see, the left-hand photo over here, we have an anode bag on a steel main. You're going to notice also that there's a plastic service coming off of that as well. But as you can clearly see, this anode bag is going to kind of sacrifice itself. It's going to rust and decay first in the ground rather than the steel line. If you were to damage one of those, or the wire running to it, in the future that could cause an issue where the gas pipe finally starts to corrode, really effectively corrodes, and maybe 2 to 3 years from now, you have a class 1 gas leak, and gas is pouring underground into other vault structures or something like that, where it could be potentially dangerous for an explosion. So we want to, if you do damage one of these, call the utility company up. They'll come out, they'll replace that anode bag. And then on the right here, we have our rectifiers. So as you can clearly see, this is like something you would definitely want to look at on a sidewalk. Clearly, you can see there's a utility feature here, and then this rectifying bed or ground bed goes farther out and goes farther down the road. And these should be marked out by the utility company as well. So if you notice something like this on the side of a pole, if you're looking for pole drops on a sidewalk, things like that, this would be a clear sign that, hey, something's not right. I need to get, a utility company out here, whichever corresponding utility company, have someone come out and rectify this issue. And then we also have regulator stations. Now we had seen regulator stations before. Generally, you see them only above ground. This is what they look like below. And you can see there's a lot of different pipes, different sizing pipes. These are regulating pressures between high pressure to low pressure systems, medium pressure, etc. So there's a lot of important pipes, sensing lines, communication lines. They have their own SCADA system where they're monitoring pressures 24/7. So there's a lot of pieces to just these gas facilities as well. If you're ever digging near one of these, obviously these are contractors that are directly working under probably the gas company in this photo. But you're ever digging near one, the gas company is going to want to be on site. They're going to want to be with you every step of the way from job start to job completion. And if you ever have any questions, obviously always utilize that telephone. We're going to talk a little bit about electric facilities. It's always good to know, as we talked about duct banks prior, as we saw in our previous parts of the presentation with the different marks for cables, ducts, etc. Here are some examples of electric facilities. There also can be duct banks of a similar style for communication as well, to make note of that. And to always make note that, hey, it's not just the conduit or the pipe inside the conduit you have to protect. You also really want to protect the duct bank, the actual concrete structure around the conduits. Because if that were to fall apart, damage, it could ruin the integrity of the utility in the future. We have a lot of old duct banks in the state as well. Some of them actually have clay conduit inside or wooden conduit inside. And they have these communication facilities built in or electric. So you definitely want to make sure to protect the concrete around it as well, because you don't want that to fail. And then you have to call out the duct bank inspector from the utility company, and then have a duct bank engineer come out, and then they have to pour the concrete to replace it. It can be quite a headache when you're dealing with damaged electric or communication facilities. So going on with some additional examples for communication facilities. To the far left over here, we have our DOT fiber optic pedestal over here. Well, not pedestal, but a post, indicating that there is a run of an underground fiber optic line. This specific case was actually I was called out to this job site because the DOT did not mark the fiber. It ended up being an issue. It was recently newly installed fiber, and that issue got rectified as well. But the excavator was digging, and he's like, this post is right here. I have an active dig ticket, but I'm really worried about this fiber, and I don't know who to contact. So he contacted me. I got in contact with the DOT. We were able to resolve that situation. And then over here on the top, we see a lot of these nowadays. These are getting installed throughout the state. These are our frontier fiber flower pots. So they kind of call them flower pots. They're kind of handholds as well. There's multiple names for it. But when you see one of these in the grass area, sometimes they may get covered by the grass as well, so they may be harder to spot. But if you were to see one of these, you would also expect there to be conduit running to it, this small orange diameter conduit over here. And then also there will be a single fiber line wire, very small wire, running out of that probably to a residential house or some building that needs communication. And then to the top right, we have another handhole. Now this is a fiber splice for multiple fibers. These two right here, you can actually see there's little nodules on each end. That's where multiple service lines are going to connect and run out from there. So obviously, hopefully the utility company is marking these properly. As the top over here, we can clearly see there are some marks in the area, a lot of electric, and then there's some communication. But around here, maybe there's some marks there, looking pretty faded. That'd be an area of concern that I'd probably want to contact the utility company up for as well. And then obviously the center photo here, it's our classic cable TV line coax cable for communication lines for such as cable TV and internet, or phone lines as well. So these are ones with, these are the types of things you want to look out for on a job site walk. You're going to make note, hey, I got some pedestals here. Do I have marks to them? Are they for the correct company? Are the markings for the correct company, such as Comcast or, Frontier as well? These are all good visual things to look at when you're doing a job site walk, or while you're excavating. If you notice any issues that pop up, you're digging along and suddenly you come across one of these flower pots and it's not marked, you're definitely going to want to contact the utility company. And we have some more examples of communication facilities. These are multi-conduits, multiple conduits all running in parallel. So you definitely, looks like it might have been damaged at one point in time. You can notice there's tape, newer conduit, kind of mixing in with the older conduit. And then over here we got quite a mess. Looks like there was a damage. Looks like they got the back truck there as well. You can actually see the back truck hose. So they're trying to dig around it safely using a back truck. But as you can clearly see, there's been some kind of damage. It does not look that good there. So things to be cognizant of when you're exposing facilities as well. We have a lot of obviously water facilities, a lot of older water facilities as well. So sometimes you may see these blue plastic lines. So hopefully they're marked accordingly as well. Then we have our wrought iron, cast iron as well. Well, we actually have lead at the top and then our wrought iron below. And those, those are a lot older. They're definitely going to be somewhat harder to locate at times, depending on the records and the signal that you'll be able to get onto these. So, when you're digging in older infrastructure areas, these are things you can expect to find in the ground. And then, classically, we have our copper services. Those are very predominant in the water industry as well. And then below here, obviously, our cast iron water main. So, you definitely want to, dig around with care again. You can see where the joint here for the cast iron is. You don't want it to bend, break, or buckle. You don't want that because that trench will fill up with water very quickly based on the size of that facility. Then we have examples of some sewer facilities. So you can see we have our photos of our mains. You notice that mains definitely been worked on a few times. We have the customer line over here where our wire interconnection point. Generally, our sewer laterals are considered privately owned. They're owned by the homeowner. Generally, they're not marked by the utility company. Some utility companies have been marking their sewer laterals, so that's always nice. No one likes to break anything sewer related, that's for sure. But you can see we've got old clay sewer main, clay to PVC adapter over here. So with these older facilities too, there's going to be tough records. It's going to be very hard to actually locate this facility. Usually the water company, whoever, or the sewer department is probably going off of old records, old maps and measurements as well. And then over here, we can clearly see this is a pump station. So this pump station, it's going to have a lot of pipes running to it. Also to make note, right over there, we have a gas meter alongside of it. So there's going to be a lot of other utilities that are going to be involved servicing that pump station so that it can operate. So when you're digging near these, if you don't have marks or you're missing anything, those are going to be those red flags. You don't want to really damage anything running to a pump station either. We're going to talk a little bit about trenchless. So we have a lot of trenchless excavation taking place, not only now with our Frontier Fiber installs, but also throughout the years as well. So they've been installed by using different trenchless methods, including using the missile or horizontal directional drilling. Sometimes, we even see with the fiber installs, they use a vibratory plow to install it. And that's where a trench is really not being opened up. So if the trench is not being opened up, there's not going to be warning tape where the facility is installed. There's not going to be sand where the facility is installed either. More times than not, that tends to be what happens. I know nowadays we do see some trenchless excavation where they can actually pull the tape with it, but generally we're not, anything installed prior to that creation of that technology is not going to have that. So if you're digging and you're always trying to, when you're digging down for a utility to expose it and you're expecting to see sand or warning tape, it's not always going to be there. And also you can think about it as years go on through excavating, sometimes that warning tape and sand can be disturbed by other excavation methods. So abandoned facilities. So based off of our call before you dig regulations, only active facilities are required to be marked. Abandoned is not required currently under our regulations. You want to use a few things to help you determine whether or not that facility may be abandoned, but you never want to assume that it is abandoned. So obviously you want to use your descriptors, your ID descriptors that we went over. You're digging down for a plastic gas main. You find a cap, you find steel in the ground instead. Does that create questions? Is it live? Is it dead? Those are the types of things you want to call up the corresponding utility company for, and they'll come out and they'll be able to verify whether it's a live, dead service or main or anything like that. So if you're digging around, you want to be able to dig and look for what you expect in the ground. But a lot of times, as we know, when excavating, there's a lot of unexpected things we could find. Sometimes there's unknown facilities that may have been owned at one point in time that are dead. Those types of things usually require to have an on-site meeting so we can help so that all the utilities can work together to resolve that. And then, pre-plan for abandoned facilities at the engineering phase. We know when we're digging in older infrastructure areas, we know that there's going to be probably abandoned stuff. You can, call the utility up for any additional help at identifying abandoned facilities. They may be able to help you with some mapping information or some general locations of where abandoned facilities may be. So it's always good, to call the utility for additional guidance when dealing with this. And then also, we have a lot of privately owned facilities as well. So these aren't covered by the call before you dig system or by our regulations. They're considered privately owned. So generally, privately owned lines may be our heater pump over here. So we got our coming off our private gas line coming from the meter set here like we saw previously. And this is running actually out back to either a pool heater, generator. I know Generac's been getting a lot of installs lately. I see the call before you dig tickets where you're seeing they're digging down, they're running gas lines to underground generators for houses because no one likes to lose power. So a lot of people are doing some prepping there, making sure that they can get power back when they need it. And then obviously like anything with regards to like lighting over here. So you got the parking lot lighting, that's probably privately owned as well, not covered, probably won't be marked. And then if you ever really, if you're dealing with a lot of privately owned facilities and you're really trying to avoid damage in them and you want to have an extra bit of coverage, on our Call Before You Dig website, we actually have a list of available private locators. So they'll quote you for a mark out, they'll go out there and they'll mark the private facilities to the best of their ability. And generally, I've dealt with a lot of the private locators, talk with them a lot, they do a great job. So it's always, there's a lot of resources you can find under our Call Before You Dig website.